All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order for tonight. Welcome to our shrunk council. We have 5 members council going forward until our by-election in October. So yeah, this is our July 11 meeting. Our next one is not until August, the 4th week of August. So after this meeting, we'll be taking a little bit of a break. So we'll start tonight with a moment of reflection before we get into the approval of the agendas, and then we'll carry on from there. So let's start with a moment of reflection. All right, thank you. So if we can go to the approval of the agendas, we have a consent agenda. Anyone wishing to make a motion on the consent agenda? Councillor Monteith makes a motion. Any items that anyone wishes to poll? If not, I'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. The regular meeting agenda, we did have a request to add a urgent item under new business, item 4, and this would be for surveillance policy, surveillance camera policy. And so that's number 4, and I don't believe there's any other additions, so a motion to approve the agenda with the added item. Councillor Wolstenholme makes a motion. All in favor? Carried. And for the good of council, does anyone have something they wish to share with all the council? Councillor Monteith.
Today at the monthly Rotary meeting, we decided to donate $10,000 toward the skate park to the town. So I have a check here if someone would like to pick it up.
All right, Anthony, go ahead. Yeah, I believe that's what the invite was for. Do you want to do a quick picture too right away, Jim, or you want to leave that for another time? This is a little impromptu, but for something of this magnitude, I don't think anything's too prompt, right? I got a camera. Oh. Did you want to tell us any more, Jim? How did you get to that conclusion?
We're pretty easy going.
Very good. So Councillor Monteith said it was a good cause, and they're up for it, so that's great news. All right. Thank you so much. Nicely done. Thank you to the Rotary. That's amazing. That'll go a long ways. All right, any other for the good of council items? Can you beat that?
I can't beat that one, but a pretty close second. I just want to welcome our 2 FCSS summer coordinators. It's Sheridan George and Lydia Nelson. They are doing an outstanding job at, if you haven't picked up the FCSS program, it is jam-packed, full of things for kids. So they are doing great. Outstanding job.
Very well. Just a quick mention, Market on Main. I thought they did their absolute best to organize and try to get people out, and people came out. But they're lacking some vendors, so if anyone knows of anyone that's interested in joining our Market on Main, there's definitely interest. We just struggling. So many vendors are busy, I believe, is a big part of the challenge. So it'll be a bit of a challenge. So hopefully that changes around. Anyone else? All right, CEO Burdett.
We will be having our Puppy Love Dog Park grand opening this Friday at 1 p.m. So we're pretty excited that that project's ready to go, and an unveiling of a sign. And it's been a great project and great support from Puppy Love, and the community is excited to use the park.
Absolutely. Anyone else have some comments for the good of council? Marco, you had your hand up earlier. You're good? All right. Okay, if that's all for tonight, then we'll move on to public hearings, of which we have one for tonight, bylaw 1960. And I will request a motion from council to open the public hearing for bylaw 1960. Councilor Monteith makes that motion. All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. So being this is a public hearing for bylaw 1960, I will ask and request anyone here wishing to speak for or against bylaw 1960 that they come forward at this time, and we have no one in the gallery. So I will ask a second time. We did have a submission that came in via email, and I think the intent was that we read the whole thing or just record it as a submission, or it's a little bit lengthy, so I don't think we wanted to read the whole thing necessarily.
My understanding was that if council would receive the letter, we could, everyone has had a chance to read it and possibly just discuss those points to make sure that council's on board with the direction that we have so far, or whether any changes need to be made.
Okay. So the letter was received dated July 8th. It was received from David Orr, a resident and former council member. He had a few points that he would wish council would consider, and he would argue in favor of having an end date or a review date so that it's not the bylaw has an end that needs to automatically be revisited. Item 2 was the existing bylaw. I'm just trying to get a summary quick. Yeah, so basically asking for a little bit more evidence of the actual investment the town has made in the bylaw for the incentive bylaw. And the third item is the qualifications, just making sure financial benefit through reduction of taxes payable will be extended to such businesses. So yeah, essentially number 2 is speaking the same, that tax dollars being used to incentive this new construction is public knowledge. And the fourth item was whether the 50,000 is based on construction cost or increased assessment. So his argument was in favor of having it stay with the increased assessment value rather than construction cost, is how I understood the letter. So council has had a chance to go through it. We've read it, we received it over the weekend, so that's something we'll definitely take into consideration in our discussions. If there is no other one here wishing to speak for or against, then I'll ask for a motion to close the public hearing for bylaw 1960. Councillor Van Hagenbos makes a motion to close the public hearing for bylaw 1960. I'll call it question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, then carrying on to new business. Oh, sorry. To consideration of the public hearing we just had for bylaw 1960. We have the bylaw before us. We've passed first reading, and the request then is for council to consider second and third reading tonight of bylaw 1960. Is anyone wishing to make a motion on bylaw 1960? Councillor Wolstenau makes the motion in favor of second reading of bylaw 1960. Any questions for administration based on the feedback we got, or any concerns you may have? Councillor Monteith.
We've talked about doing a survey at the end of a development project to see what the hiccups were or problems, whatever. And I realize this is a different issue, but it seems to me we could do a survey after each of these projects for the incentive just to see if it was actually having an impact or not. And I realize that that's very difficult to delineate. But I think at least going through the motions of that, we may find something that we hadn't thought about, or find something that says, yes, it worked, and they wouldn't have done this if there wasn't the incentive or that type of thing. So I don't think that would cause a lot of work or hassle, but just to have something so that we have a bit of a feedback of what the program was to the people who benefit from it.
Yeah, some official feedback based on the application of the incentive and whether it was something that was, obviously they're going to say it's a value, but why perhaps would be a good question. Any other comments for or against bylaw 1960? I think some of the concerns, and whether we have an end date or not, I think the bylaw is not indefinite anyways. They can be canceled at any time. I think having the automatic cancellation creates some level of uncertainty for staff and business owners if all of a sudden it could not be approved without, but either way, there's going to be debate and discussion. So, CEO Burdett.
Yes, I just wanted to kind of speak to the time and the end date. As proposed initially by administration, having the bylaw go in perpetuity seemed to be reasonable, just like you said, with, that there's no end date, that it's going to be a program that we continually support. One thing that I did like, and perhaps I was swayed a bit by David Orr's letter, with the end date, let's say it was every 4 years, so that at least once a term, it had to be reviewed. Because what might happen with administration, like, oh, sure, we should review it. People get busy, things happen. But once it has to be reviewed, once there's an absolute must, it's going to get done for sure. And so that's that. I think I was a bit swayed to think, well, as much as it is a little bit more work to make sure that it's reviewed every 4 years administratively, I think that's a sound principle. And if, as the public and business owners get used to that, yes, it gets reviewed every year, not necessarily that we're going to take it away, but that perhaps it just needs small adjustments every 4 years, might be a sound practice.
Okay, Councillor Wilson, you had your first.
I think that's a good idea. That we do have a review date, and that doesn't mean it's an end date. It's just that we want to look it over again. And if we decide that it doesn't need to be reviewed, then fine, we just keep going. We don't have to do a new bylaw.
Councillor Monteith.
How often are town policies reviewed?
Right now, we're working on establishing a rotating cycle of getting them reviewed. We're supposed to review them all each year. Internally, are we not? Yes. Yeah, and so they need to be reviewed administratively, but they don't all come before council.
Yearly seems a little much. I could see every 3 years maybe or something, you just rotate them so many every year so that you're always reviewing and keeping up to date. But yeah, I was just wondering if this bylaw would come under that rotation so that it comes up every 3 years or 4 years or whatever, so that it doesn't get lost. Because realistically, whether it's an unknown end date or a scripted one, the council can do whatever they want, right? So I'm sort of, who knows?
I think before we carry on too much further, there was some conversation about just conflict or pecuniary interest, and we did get some feedback from council and from reviewing the MGA that we would appreciate if CAO Burdett can share with us quick.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so we took a look at the MGA to review what's written there about pecuniary interest, given that this item, the tax incentive bylaw, really has the potential of monetarily affecting any business owners on council, especially if they have things on the go or even in the future. And at the surface, it could appear that there could be some pecuniary interest, because if council makes a decision and you're a business owner, all of a sudden you're benefiting from that. But the MGA has taken that into consideration in section 170 of the MGA 3, and then section K. They've actually addressed the fact of businesses and business owners, and a business owner on council can actually vote in favor or against. They can be a part of the process when it comes to making decisions that affect all businesses, as long as it's not a decision that solely affects their business. And so it's very similar to every time, if we were to raise the mill rates, right? Or the commercial rates, or even the residential for everyone else who owns, property in town. It will have some effect on you financially. If we lower the rates, every councillor gets a little bit more, a few dollars in their pocket, right? And so it kind of falls in that umbrella where, yes, there could be a potential benefit, but because it's a benefit available for all, it's appropriate to remain and to be able to vote and to have a say on those types of decisions. Any questions on that?
I don't see any questions, and I think that makes good sense. All right, any other questions, comments on this bylaw 1960? Councillor Van Anglos?
The switch in qualification based on the concern brought forward in the letter from David Orr, do we feel that's a fair observation? Like I kind of agree with it. 50,000 in construction costs in no way equates to 50,000 in increased assessment. It never does. So I think this drastically lowers the bar, and I guess it's a council decision. I just wonder if it's realistic. Like, to me, what does 50,000 in assessment actually come down? What's commercial mill rate or commercial mill rate in this case? What does that actually come down to? Like, what's the dollar value? $100,000 worth of assessment. What's the actual 12%?
It's 1,200.
1,200, yeah. Okay, so we're looking at $650 on 50% of that, right? 50.
1.2, I think
1.2.
is what it should be, right? Not,
Yeah.
because it's per thousand, so. Yeah, you did.
No, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Sorry, what's the residential?
0.76.
Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah.
So you have $50,000 investment would equate to about a $600 increase in tax.
Yeah, $600. Yeah. $650.
So to me, that should be almost the bare minimum that we would need to do an incentive for, because otherwise it does seem hard to justify 600. Technically, over 2.25 years, that's maybe 1,500 over 3 years. So it's quite a bit of administrative work for something that's.
Well, with the 50,000 in assessment, we set an actual threshold on the assessment. With the 50,000 in construction cost, it could only be 20,000 in assessment, and now we're opening up, our administration to a lot of headache for something that isn't even worth our time. Like, doesn't even, it might improve the town in regards to beautification and such. Like, I don't want to stop anybody, but on their end, I see no value on an assessment end. So I think we have to keep this to an assessment parameter instead of a dollar value. That's my view on this.
Councillor Monteith?
If there was a building project and that combined with an increase in the assessment in town, do we differentiate that when we're determining how much they get waived?
So you're asking whether they've made an
Well,
improvement
if
plus
their
the
assessment
change.
goes up so much, how much of that is new construction? How much of that is the assessment in town going up? And so therefore the assessment goes up 10% or whatever that number is. Just wondering if we differentiate that in the bylaw.
Yeah, that the increase has to be for the new construction, for the addition, not just the general increase across the board.
You can differentiate that.
Yeah, I think the question is if it's a market increase to assessment or a construction increase to assessment, can we differentiate between the two when we get the assessment? Chris?
So I can speak to new construction. I haven't seen any expansion ones currently where I've had to split them. But when it's a new construction, it goes from vacant land to land with an improvement. So that's your baseline year. That first assessment for that improvement is your baseline year that goes through all 3 years. So you don't, that's your amount that you're gonna get your calculation on. And I haven't seen an expansion one, so I can't speak to that, sorry.
Yeah, the only time a market increase would come into play if it was an expansion.
Assessments go up in general because the market goes up. That's part of the increase in the assessment if they happen to have an expansion at the same time. Because I don't think we should be rewarding someone because assessments went up in town when everyone else has to pay and they don't because they happen to do an expansion that year. That's my only concern there.
That's in year 2 and 3 then, essentially.
And I think probably lands from benchmark can figure that out for us, definitely, when we get an expansion.
All right, so bylaw 1960 is essentially replacing the previous bylaw 1912. If council's of the opinion to keep a majority of what was to what's new, I think we can entertain a motion to amend the motion for second reading of bylaw 1960 with proposed amendments. Is that how that would work? Because the motion's on the floor to pass second reading of bylaw 1960.
So there's really no big rush, you guys, because there's no new applications that have come in. Well, there's 2 that have come in that fall under the current bylaw. So if you want, we could do second reading and then make all the changes and bring it back clean and do third reading in August.
Okay. I think that would probably make the most sense. That way we have a little bit of time to review it with administration and whomever else. Any other questions or debate, discussion on this? So administration can look at it all at once. Councillor Van Agbos?
Just digging into Councillor Monte's question. So I'm aware of properties in the past that due to the algorithm, they fall like, there's just no real comparables from an assessment perspective, that the sale price established the value. And this property gets sold for the first time in 30 years, and it goes from $150,000 to $300,000 worth of assessment. Does this property now qualify for this, or is there actual? And I know if I read it, it'd tell me, but I'm just asking because I don't want to read it right now. So, does it? I have read it. I just can't remember. Does it actually say that this is in regards to improvement of the property, or just okay? Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on bylaw 1960? CEO Burdett?
I just wanted to make sure that it's the opinion of all council to remain on the assessment side of things as opposed to the construction cost of things. A few thoughts from administration was whether that needs to be raised to that kind of in agreeance with David Orr. He kind of thought if it was going to be construction cost, it should be raised to kind of make it more worthwhile because there is some administrative cost to spending the time on it. The one thing I do like about the cost is someone, when they're getting into a project, already knows that they're going to be applicable, right? They'll be eligible based on what they're putting into it, and we can never know what the assessment is going to be perfectly. And so those are just some points from administrative view to why we were leaning to, or why we proposed the costs. But if if a council is more on board with remaining with the assessment value being of 50,000, I just want to make sure I know Marco felt that way, but that everyone is on the same page.
Any further thoughts on that? Leaving it as per assessment? Councillor Monteith?
Just debating whether that number is too low.
The 50,000, but you would agree with assessment. It's just whether the number is 50 or... Okay, Councillor Van Hagerbos?
Just to add to that, so based on the increase in value of building products in the last 2 years and assessment, as a whole going up 5% as a direct comparable, if you were to take a building that has 10 overhead doors, for example, that's the example I'm going to use because that's what I know. So old doors, they're from the 70s, and the value of that building in 2021 is X, and they decide to replace those doors in 2021. The tab for replacing those in 2022 has increased by 90%. So the assessment is going to go up according to the value in 2021, but in 2022 you're going to pay 90% more, but your assessment's not going to go up anymore. So that's why I think tying it to a dollar value is not as realistic and accurate as actual assessment. So I think that's where we need to be very clear on assessment value, because dollar value does not equate assessment value.
Okay, Councillor Henniger?
I'm just going to put forward a motion after to bring it back to August meeting. I think there's some things that we still need to iron out with administration.
Yeah, I don't think we need a
No.
motion for that, so I think more...
Sorry, that's all I'd like to see some clarification on that from administration.
Clarification on which, sorry?
Just what direction are we going with the bylaw? We are keeping it in the same context of what we're dealing with right now, which is bylaw. Sorry, the numbers are mixing me up now.
So bylaw 1960 is the new one, bylaw
Right.
1912 is the old one. The question is whether council would agree with keeping it at
Assessment.
the trigger based on assessment value and not on construction costs.
And I would go on assessment based on, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Miranda.
I just wanted to clarify for Marco's question about the doors. The trigger is also required by a development permit, so it's not maintenance and upgrade. It would have to be a full development permit. That is one of the clarifying projects, so it wouldn't be maintenance and repairs. So I just want to clarify that.
So seeing as you don't need a permit to replace doors, I guess that example isn't valid, but I think you can apply that to the building products in general, that they've increased drastically. We all hope they'll come back down, but I don't think that using a dollar value of product equates to a dollar value of assessment. That's why it's so critical we go back to assessment.
Okay. Any other comments on the bylaw? I know there was a few items there we went through, the assessments and then whether there's a review, and it seems like there would be support for a fixed review date, and that makes perfect sense. That way we're forced to make sure it's being reviewed regularly. Any other comments? See none, the motion for second reading is on the floor, and then after that we can postpone the third reading until it's been brought back to council for final approval. Any further debate, discussion? Seeing none, we'll call it to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And item 1 under new business, we are looking at Alberta Municipalities Convention, and our CEO, Anthony Burdett, would like to speak to this.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's that time of year again where Council gets to decide or discuss who's going to attend the annual Alberta Municipalities Convention held in September 20th to 23rd up in Calgary this year. I've heard it's a wonderful convention to go to, and we could get a lot out for the councilors and administration. So administration would like to know how many councilors and how many people the council would like to send to this event this year.
All right, I think there was a recommendation in the package as well. Anyone prepared to make a motion on this? I think this year will be in Calgary, and it's been a few years since we've all been able to go. I think 2019 is probably the last time we were all there. I would recommend to council that we prove that all council members can attend. There's 5 of us, so there's some cost savings for that as well. Anyone prepared to make a motion on this subject?
Motion to confirm attendance and approve 5 counselors for the convention in September.
All right, Councillor Henniger makes the motion. Any further discussion? Questions? Debate? Councillor Monteith, you have your hand on the button. Twitching, okay. All right, if there's no further debate or discussion, then we'll call to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Is that all you need for now? Okay, very good. All right, and moving on to item 2 under new business, tax incentive applications, and we will ask our Director of Finance, Chris Holbeck, to speak to this.
Good evening, Council. Tonight's tax incentive night. We have received 2 tax incentive applications, and they would apply to the 2022, 2023, and 2024 fiscal years. One is for a business that was built in 2021, and one is for a shop out in the industrial area. The business, well, it's not a secret, it's Dairy Queen. The reason it came in now when it's come in is when we were having discussions about wait until the assessment shows up on your tax notice before you come in and do your application. Well, this was the year that the full amount showed up on their tax assessment or their tax notice. So she came in and I said, well, you're kind of, according to the bylaw, you're late. And she's like, well, you told me to come in after it showed up on my assessment. So I said, well, let's get it in then. And the second one for the shop, the applicant said they thought it was automatic. So they just thought that you automatically got it. And I said, I apologized and said no, but I said, I've got another one going to council. So if you get your application in also, we can just take them both, get it dealt with. So there are 2 tax incentive applications. I've reviewed the applications, they were complete. And the recommendation tonight is that that council approves administration entering into the tax incentive agreements for those 2 properties. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone prepared to make a motion on the recommendation? Councillor Monteith, as per the recommendation? Correct? Yes, very good. So Councillor Monteith makes a motion as per the recommendation to approve the 2 tax incentive applications. Any further questions or discussion, Councillor Monteith?
I'm presuming when we go over these that a shop is a pretty general description. Some of those shops on 12th Street are housing trailers and stuff like that. So it's not really a business. So I'm just wondering if we take that into account.
Sorry, when you mean housing, which, sorry?
We'll use it for storage for
Okay.
motorhomes or other things. It's not operating a business. It's just more of a storage unit.
Yeah, I think this application would be strictly if it's non-residential based on its zoning and application. So I think this one is Boyle Avenue and would be a new storage shed, large storage shed for hay and such materials.
Sorry, I just wanted to intervene for a sec there. And we don't know the use of it when they construct it. Like they just come in with a permit and sometimes after the fact, they aren't using it maybe they're using it personally or as a business, but at the initial stage, all I see is an application for a non-residential building and that's what I come with.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried.
You?
Thank you. Item 3 under new business is our 2022 year-to-date revenue and expenditures reports, and our Director of Finance, Chris Holbeck, will present this to us as well.
Thank you, Council. I don't know, there wasn't a whole lot of variances or anything to really discuss. There's one that I will discuss with you when we get there. But I did try the percentage versus the dollar variance, and Anthony likes it, so I thought maybe it would be better information for council to be a percentage versus a variance, but at the same time, council has to realize that percentage works for some things that come in monthly, and it doesn't work for other things that that the town pays immediately, so it's at 100% in June. But there's no more of it coming in during the year. So you just have to have that realization when you take a look at these financial reports with percentages versus dollars. And I can fit both in, but I didn't want to confuse the issue. I can take the GL numbers out because you don't care about those. And I can put both in. So it's up to council how they want to see this report in the future. I put my overall comments on the very first page about I haven't done amortization estimate. Anthony has told me that going forward, I will be doing an amortization calculation monthly. So Jim will be pleased about that. So there's no more Chris getting out of that one. Benefits never get broken out of wages until end of year because it's just a real workhorse. And I only do it once. And interdepartmental allocations of expenses between departments like advertising or those kind of things, gas and oil. I do that in the third quarter, so you're not going to see it here. And there wasn't any big variances, but I did want to speak to page 4 of 27. So if you flip to page 4 of 27, that is the second page of administration expenses. And if you go down the description column to the last expense, it's called tax incentive program expense. And because it's tax incentive night, we're going to talk about this. So you'll see that I budgeted $18,400 in my budget for 2022, and we are well over that. I just wanted council to know that about $3,000 of that is an error on my calculation part for the tax incentives. When I calculated tax incentives, I included the land portion. So I've discussed it with the CAO, sorry. My bad, just going really just not paying attention or just being too quick trying to get things out. So the land amount was part of the calculation. So I've already recalculated it and sent letters to the 4 property owners affected. And we will be reducing next year's tax incentive by the amount that they overpaid this year. So just in case any of you get a resident or a business owner who comes and says, oh my gosh, that director of finance can't calculate tax incentives very well. Just so you know, we're not clawing it back this year. We're just going to reduce their tax incentive next year. So I apologize for that error, and it will not ever happen again. And then other than that, there's really no major variances at this time of the year to discuss. But if council has any questions about any of the items, please just ask.
Councillor Monteith.
Just 2 that caught my eye. One was task force expenses. It was like $200. We budgeted $20,000. So I'm just wondering where that's sitting. And I think I know the answer to this one, but utilities for streetlights, we budgeted 170, we've only spent 57, so I'm presuming that's some timing.
So I'm going to let Anthony speak to the task force expenses because that is his, one of the committees that he sits on. And yes, streetlights is a monthly expense, so that'll be coming in throughout the year, and I'll probably be over budget on that, knowing how electricity rates are going.
As for the task force expenses, in previous years, the task force would cover, the general incentives and things that were going on in that area. Given that we are myself, very green in getting the task force up and running, and we haven't seen any expenditures or very little expenditures to date, but I would anticipate that the second half of this year, we would see a big jump in that as we get things rolling.
Right, any other comments, questions, Councillor Van Eigenbos?
I imagine the police funding contract difference in proposed and actual is also based on timing. The province hasn't requested their portion of their payment from the town just yet. It shows $793 in actual, and the budget is 118,000. So if they're not, if they sent it to the wrong town, that's great, but just checking.
You're talking about the police funding?
Contract, yeah.
So we budget, I haven't budgeted ours this year. I budget a payable. Jim's got me budgeting a payable every year because their fiscal year isn't the same as our fiscal year. Ours is January to December. Theirs is April to March. So the little bit that you see there is how much last year's was more than I budgeted. So that gets pushed into this year, and then I'll budget our 118,000 for this year, and then next year you're going to see my overage about now because they're usually over what they estimated 5 years ago, and then I'll set up the payable probably third quarter again. But they did not send us. They will send us a bill. They know where we live.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments or questions? Anything else you wanted to highlight? Administration, Sia Burdette? No? All right, if there's no motion to accept this information, would be great. Councillor Henniger makes the motion to accept the year-to-date financials as information. Call it the question, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And our last item tonight is a discussion on security cameras, item 4, new business. I do not believe we had, did we get any background? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it should be accessible in your Laserfish documents.
All right. Do you want to introduce this topic to us?
Absolutely. And first, I'd just like to apologize for the hastiness that this was added to the agenda later than we would have hoped. So the town has a number of facilities, and we do have surveillance cameras in place right now. And we've had them for some years. Administration recognized the need to have a policy on surveillance, video surveillance specifically, because often video surveillance is you're dealing with vandalism, or you're dealing with crimes and things like that. And so it's very important to have a very sound, legitimate policy. So when, so administration knows just how to store the information, to treat the information, who has access to the information for legal purposes and for FOIP reasons. And so, yeah, given that we have the cameras in place now, we knew that this needed to be done. And so we've established this video surveillance policy with a lot of help from legal, just to make sure that it is sound and appropriate, given, like I said, the often legal nature of why we have to view video surveillance. So legal's gone through this with us, and we've established this policy. Ultimately, I guess the highlights of the policy are that in any area, the surveillance is for, accidents and crimes or thefts or anything like that, for protection. Access to that video surveillance is very limited. Director of Operations, because he's over the facilities, and myself, and then other employees, if they so need to see the video surveillance with my permission. Just because there's a certain level of privacy and security, and that's all written into the policy so that it's very clear on what we can and who can see the information. And one of the reasons we brought this forward today, we had this had been done in the last few weeks or a month, is just that we have been seeing a few instances where we could use a few more video surveillance, a few more cameras, and we feel like it's most appropriate that if our policy is up to date and approved before we start putting in new cameras at this point. Yeah, I'm obviously open to any questions, but the recommendation would be that council approves Administration Policy 37, so that we might be able to appropriately continue our video surveillance to protect our assets and protect our staff and residents.
Okay, very good. Anyone prepared to make a motion on this policy? As per the recommendation?
Motion to approve as per the recommendation.
Councilman Eimboss makes the motion. Any further questions for administration? Councilor Monteith?
Is cameras at Centennial Park and recycling depot, are those the only new ones?
Yes, at this point, adding cameras to those two locations are the new ones. There has been discussion on whether additional cameras at some of our existing facilities based on areas, but right now it's the new ones at the depot and Centennial Park.
For communication purposes, would you be able to clarify some of the concerns you've been having regarding why we would want additional cameras?
Yes, the Centennial Park especially, we've had previous instances of vandalism to flags on the flagpole, and recently, very recently, we've had instances of graffiti in the bathrooms. Those bathrooms are open to the public until 8 p.m. And often when the park is hustling and bustling, there's no issue, but I imagine on quiet nights when some people have chosen to, deface public property, that's where we're seeing a lot of cost in repairs and damages. And so with this, because this doesn't solve all of our problems, administration has discussed just how we implement a few practices to ensure, if when things like this happen, we can actually verify or at least narrow it down who would the culprit be. Because, they're not going to be in the bathrooms, so you can't see anyone actually defacing property if it was to happen there. But a policy to have daily checks on them so you could at least know what day something happened. And then from there, also encouraging residents to, if they see something, to report it so we can narrow down time. And then you can start looking at the surveillance that way. Because, like I said, video surveillance alone isn't going to solve our problems, but by being able to narrow down the window in which we can find the crime was committed, then we can possibly have some consequences and hopefully deter future people from vandalizing the town's property.
Councillor Henniger?
No, thanks for bringing this policy forward. I think it's very good for public perception as well that you've noted that everything will be very clear where there is cameras in public. Obviously, in Centennial, there's children's and family and things like that, and at the pool, but coming down to safety and respect to our properties around town, I think this is great. And I just want to say there was vandalism when my family was there on Saturday, and a town staff was there within 20 minutes. And just want to thank your team over there. Thank you.
Yes, CEO Burdett.
One item too that you just reminded me of, Mackenzie, just anywhere where we have video surveillance, we will always have adequate signage letting people know in the area that there is video surveillance, to which they could also refer to our policy. But just so that it is abundantly clear that, when you're at Centennial Park, there'll be some signs there on the main pathways that people coming in that area will know. Same with recycling depot and our other plants, just so that it's abundantly clear so that they know.
Very good. Obviously, it's concerning that that kind of activity is going on, and we would appeal to the community to respect the property that has been provided for the community to enjoy. And we only hope that with a little bit of extra clarity and that this would cease to be a problem. But yeah, anyone seeing and noticing any activity like that, we definitely encourage people to report it so that we can take the necessary action. Any other questions on the policy? Councillor Van Hybos made the motion. If there's no further discussion or debate, we'll call it to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And being there is no in-camera items, that does adjourn our meeting for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for your attention.